What if the one person everyone treated like she didn't exist was the one person you should have never touched? She couldn't hear a single word they said about her. She couldn't hear the laughter. She couldn't hear the whispers that bounced off those marble floors every single morning. But she felt every single one of them. In her chest. In her hands. In the way she gripped that mop just a little tighter every time they walked past. Her name was Sarah. And she cleaned the 42nd floor of the Tower every day for 2 years. Silent, invisible, just trying to survive. The CEO's daughters thought she was nothing. They thought her silence made her weak. They thought because she couldn't speak up for herself, no one ever would. They were wrong. And by the time they realized it, it was already too late to apologize. Stay with me. Because what happened inside that building over the next 72 hours is the kind of story that will make you question everything you think you know about power. Sarah Hahn was 26 years old when she took the cleaning job at Global Industries. She wasn't supposed to be there. 3 years before this, she was studying interior architecture at Seoul National University on a partial scholarship. Top of her class. Her professors said she had an eye for beauty that most people spend decades trying to develop. Then the accident happened. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a car crash or an explosion. It was just a fever, a rare infection that moved too fast, hit too hard, and by the time the doctors caught it, the nerve damage was already done. She woke up in a hospital bed and the world had gone completely, permanently silent. Her scholarship didn't cover what came next. The medical bills did what the fever couldn't. They finished her off financially. Her father had passed 2 years before. Her mother worked double shifts at a laundry. There was no safety net. There was just Sarah, standing at the edge of a life she'd planned and watching it fall apart. So she took the cleaning job. She didn't complain. She didn't ask for pity. She learned the building's rhythms by watching. Who came in early, who left late, which floors needed extra attention on Mondays. She communicated through a small notepad she kept in her apron pocket, and she did her job better than anyone else on that staff. Her supervisor, Mr. Choi, said she was the most reliable person he'd ever hired. In 2 years, she never missed a single shift. Not one. But the 42nd floor was different from the rest of the building. The 42nd floor belonged to the daughters. Now, I need you to understand something about these 2 women before I tell you what they did. Because when you hear it, you're going to think I'm exaggerating. I promise you, I am not. Jae-hye and Soo-jin Ri were the twin daughters of Chairman Ri Young-hyun. The man who built Ri Global from a single import-export business into a conglomerate with operations in 11 countries. He was strict, old school, believed in discipline and silence and earning your place. His daughters believed in none of that. They had the kind of beauty that made people move out of the way in hallways. They wore clothes that cost more than Sarah's monthly rent. And they had learned very early in life that there are 2 types of people in the world. The ones who matter, and the ones who clean up after them. Sarah, to them, was the second type. It started small, the way it always does. Jae-hye would leave coffee cups balanced on the edge of the sink, not quite inside it, not quite outside. Just positioned to fall the moment someone bumped the counter. When Sarah would clean it up without a word, Jae-hye would smile at her sister like they'd just won something. Soo-jin was worse. She would watch Sarah work with this flat, cold expression, like she was watching an appliance function. One afternoon she walked past Sarah scrubbing the hallway floor, and deliberately dragged the heel of her shoe across the section she'd just cleaned, leaving a long black streak. Then she looked directly at Sarah and waited. Sarah looked back at her, picked up the mop, started over. Soo-jin laughed all the way down the hallway. But that was just Tuesday. What happened on Friday? That was something else entirely. Because on Friday they stopped playing small. And what they did in front of 30 witnesses is the reason you're still watching this video right now. Friday morning. The 42nd floor was unusually crowded because the company was hosting a quarterly review. Department heads, junior executives, board observers, all moving through the corridors in tailored suits and polished shoes. Sarah arrived at 7 a.m. like always. She had the hallway outside the main conference room to clean before the meetings began. She was almost done when it happened. Jae-hye rounded the corner carrying a large iced coffee. The kind with the wide straw and the clear cup and the foam piled on top. She was looking at her phone. She wasn't watching where she was going. She walked directly into Sarah's mop bucket. Cold, dirty water exploded across the floor. Across Jaihai's shoes. Up the hem of her cream-colored dress. The hallway went quiet. Jaihai looked down at her dress. Then up at Sarah. And something shifted behind her eyes. Something that had nothing to do with the coffee or the water or the accident. Something that had been looking for exactly this moment. "Are you serious right now?" she said. Loudly. Clearly. For the audience that had already started forming. Sarah reached immediately for her notepad. Started to write. "I'm so sorry, it was an accident. Jaihai snatched the notepad out of her hands. "Oh, she's writing me a note." She held it up so the people around her could see. "She can't even speak. Can you believe this? They're letting mutes work on our floor now." Someone in the hallway laughed nervously. Sujin appeared from around the corner. She'd heard the noise, or maybe she'd been waiting, and the moment she assessed the scene, she stepped in beside her sister. "Look at her hands," Sujin said, loud enough for everyone. "She's shaking. You'd think she'd be used to making messes by now." Sarah's hands were shaking, but not from fear. From something she was working very hard to keep locked down. Jaihai dropped the notepad on the wet floor. Then she reached past Sarah, past her shoulder, close enough that Sarah could feel the movement of air, and knocked the remaining contents of the mop bucket across the floor. Deliberately. Slowly. "Clean it up," she said. "That's what you're here for." And then she walked away. And the hallway full of people, 30 witnesses in expensive clothes, said nothing. Did nothing. Went back to their phones and their conversations like a woman hadn't just been publicly stripped of every shred of dignity she had. Sarah stood in the middle of that hallway for a long moment. Then she bent down, picked up her notepad from the wet floor, put it back in her apron pocket, and started cleaning. She didn't cry. Not there. Not where they could see it. But someone else saw all of it. Someone none of them knew was watching. There's a camera on every floor of Re Global Tower. Standard security. Nobody thinks much about it. But the footage from that Friday morning was about to end up somewhere no one in that building ever expected. And when I tell you who was sitting on the other end of that feed, I need you to have your jaw ready. His name was Kang Min-jae. If you moved in certain circles in the city, business, finance, the kind of politics that happens in back rooms and private dining floors, you knew that name. You knew what it meant. You knew to say it quietly. Kang Min-jae was 34 years old, and he controlled more of this city than the mayor did. His empire wasn't built on legitimate business alone. Everyone knew that, and everyone also knew better than to say it out loud. He had 100 men on his personal security detail. He had holdings in real estate, shipping, hospitality, and 3 industries that don't appear on any public filing. Stake. Kang Min-jae had been reviewing the building's security footage as part of his standard quarterly audit. His team cross-checked everything. It was just procedure. When one of his analysts flagged the 7:14 a.m. clip from the 42nd floor hallway, he watched it once. Then he watched it again. He didn't say anything for almost a full minute. Then he asked his assistant one question. "Who is she?" Her name was Sarah Han. 26. Deaf since 23. 2 years of perfect attendance. Staff performance record. Exceptional. No complaints. No incidents. No family connections to anyone in the company. He read the file twice. Then he picked up his phone and made 2 calls. The first call was to his head of security. The second call was to someone at the city's top architectural firm, because he'd noticed something in Sarah's employee intake form. Under previous education, someone had typed, Seoul National University, Architecture, incomplete. By the time Sarah arrived for her Monday morning shift, things had already been set in motion that she knew absolutely nothing about. Here's what I want you to understand. Kang Min-jae didn't do what he did next because he was soft. This man had never done anything in his life out of softness. What he did next, he did because of something he saw in that footage that went way beyond the incident. And when I explain it to you, everything about this story is going to make a different kind of sense. 3 years before Sarah lost her hearing, Kang Min-jae had a younger sister. Her name was Yuna. She was quiet, brilliant, studying to be a nurse. She had a smile that made everyone in a room feel immediately at ease. Yuna was also deaf, born that way, and she had spent her entire life being treated as less than, passed over, pitted, dismissed. She died at 22 in a hospital because a nurse on the night shift hadn't bothered to learn the basic signs she'd taped to her own wall chart. A miscommunication about her medication dosage. An error that should never have happened. An error that wouldn't have happened if someone had just looked at her like she was a real person worth paying attention to. Kang Min-jae had built an empire after that. And he had never, in 11 years, been able to shake the image of his sister standing in a room full of people, trying to be seen. When he watched Sarah Han in that hallway, standing perfectly still while they humiliated her, picking her notepad up off the wet floor, going back to work, he didn't see a stranger. He saw Yuna. And something in him that had been very, very cold for a very long time caught fire. Monday morning. Jae-hai and Sujin arrived on the 42nd floor at 9 a.m., lattes in hand, laughing about something on one of their phones. They didn't notice anything different at first. Then Jae-hai looked up and saw the men. There were 4 of them standing outside the main conference room. Large. Still. Wearing black. Not building security. She knew the building security team. These weren't them. These men had a different kind of stillness. The kind that comes from knowing exactly what they're capable of. The conference room door was closed. What's going on? Jae-hai asked one of the junior executives hovering near the hallway. The executive looked uncomfortable. There's a meeting. With the majority stakeholder. Sujin frowned. What majority stakeholder? Dad didn't mention. The conference room door opened. Chairman Ri walked out first. He looked like he'd aged 5 years since Friday. His face was arranged in an expression that both daughters recognized, and had never seen directed at them before. The expression he used when he was in a room with someone who had power over him. Behind him came Kang Min-jae. Jae-hai didn't know the name. But she knew the face, she'd seen it in financial press. She knew the energy. She knew that the 4 men in the hallway suddenly made complete sense. Kang walked out, buttoned his jacket, and looked at both daughters with an expression that contained absolutely nothing. No angit. No satisfaction. Just a kind of flat, absolute certainty. Good morning, he said. I'd like to introduce you to someone. From around the corner of the hallway, Sarah appeared. She was not in her uniform. She was in a blazer. Her hair was down. She was holding a small sign language interpreter's device, the kind that displays text in real time. She looked directly at the Ri sisters and did not look away. Kang Min-jae said, "This is Sarah Han. As of this morning, she is the newest junior consultant attached to the Ri Global Design Renovation Project, a project my team is funding. She'll be working on the 42nd floor. I expect her to be treated accordingly." Jae-hai opened her mouth. Kang looked at her. She closed it. I've also, he continued, arranged for a full review of Friday's hallway incident with the company's HR department, the board, and my own legal team. The footage has been preserved. Anyone named in the review who is not a direct blood relative of Chairman Ri will be terminated this week. Those who are blood relatives, he paused, will have their behavior noted for the board. He looked at the sisters one more time. Just one more second of that flat, absolute gaze. And then he turned to Sarah. He signed something to her. Slowly, clearly, with his hands. Her expression changed. Something in her face broke open. Just for a moment, before she composed herself. Later, his assistant would tell someone who told someone else what he'd signed. Nobody is going to look through you again. Not while I'm here. But here's where the story takes a turn that nobody, not the sisters, not Chairman Ri, not a single person in that building, saw coming. Because what happened between Kang Min-jae and Sarah Han over the next 6 months wasn't just justice. It was something the city had never seen before. And it started with a question she wrote on a notepad and slid across a desk to the most feared man in Seoul. Jae-hai resigned from the company 3 weeks later. The board made it clear her position was no longer tenable. Sujin was moved to an overseas subsidiary with no public explanation given. The junior executives who had stood in that hallway and said nothing were each quietly moved to positions with less visibility. One of them later said in an interview, years later anonymously, that the worst moment of his career wasn't being reassigned. It was watching a cleaning lady pick her notepad up off a wet floor while 30 educated adults stood around and did nothing. Chairman Ri never fully recovered his grip on the company. Kang Min-jae absorbed more of the operational control over the following year. It was, in financial circles, described as a strategic transition. Everyone knew what it really was. Sarah Han completed her architectural certification 18 months later. Sponsored, fully funded, by a scholarship foundation that had been quietly established by an anonymous donor. She now leads the interior design team for a real estate development group with projects in 4 countries. And Kang Min-jae? He was seen exactly 7 months after that Monday morning on the 42nd floor, at a small restaurant in Mapo district. Not his usual kind of place. No security perimeter, no reservation under a different name. Just a corner table, 2 people, and a notepad sitting between them on the table because she still preferred it sometimes. Even with all the technology available, he was learning to sign. She was teaching him. A city full of people had spent years looking past a woman who couldn't hear them. The most feared man in Seoul looked at her and saw everything. Now here's what I need you to sit with before you go. Because this story isn't really about a CEO's daughters getting what they deserved. It's about what happens when people confuse silence with weakness. Sarah never fought back. Not once, not in the way you'd expect. She didn't have to. She just kept showing up. She kept being exactly who she was. And eventually, the right person looked up and paid attention. The question that's going to stay with me, and I think it's going to stay with you too, is this. How many Sarahs are there right now? In buildings you walk through. In rooms you sit in spaces where the wrong people have decided who gets to matter? And the harder question, the one I actually want you to answer in the comments. Are you sure you're not one of the people standing in that hallway, saying nothing? Drop your answer below. Because I read every single one. And next week, the story I'm bringing you makes this one look like a warm-up. Don't go anywhere.